with waterfront listings that are true in any kind of waterfront community, that when you're selling it, you're not really selling the house. If you're a boater and you're looking for water, the water is more important than the house. The house is important. I mean, it certainly changes, what you're willing to pay for it. But the bottom line is, that boater, if it's boating water, you really need to understand what their priorities are, what kind of boat, what's the draft. If you don't know what a draft is, that's an important terminology for you to learn, because the draft is the amount of water that the amount of the water that the boat needs to get through. So it won't hit.
Or you're going to have some hard troubles, right? If you don't have enough water.
It's how much the hull is in the water.
Yeah, that's what I was going to say. It's how much hull is in the water and how much water you need in order not to be in hot water.
So most of, if you're drafting more than 4 feet here in Gulf Harbors, you do have to watch the tides at a certain point. They're talking about dredging. That's a whole nother story. But right now, I mean, if they're less than 4 feet, you're pretty much 24/7, unless you're in an area, and that's why there are so many things that you need to know about what's important to that buyer before you even waste time showing them certain lots or houses that just aren't going to work for them if that boating is really their first priority. Does that make sense?
Yeah, because you've got bridges to go under, you've got tide shifts, and if you don't know what that is, they may buy the wrong property, and their boat lifestyle may not match their house. And in our neighborhood is a great example. Most of our houses cost less than our boats, right?
Very, very true. When I first moved here on Flormar Terrace, when we bought our house for $79,500, there were really no boats on that entire North Channel. And I don't know if all of you have had a chance, you probably haven't, to come up here, but if you can't mooch a ride with either me or Jessica and Mark
it's not that far. It's just past Tucky, Florida.
Yeah, I would suggest you go to Windsong Charters here, right next to the new Widow Fletcher's restaurant, waterfront restaurant here on the North Channel, and rent a boat, rent a pontoon, and go and explore these canals, because there's just no way to know the water that's better than seeing it from the water. That's really what it's all about. And a lot of buyers, they have a lot of misunderstandings too about affordability. And Gulf Harbors is the last, until they do the dredging, it's the last really deep water Gulf access home in the state of Florida, period. I mean, by the time you go to Hudson, there are canals that have deep water access, but and again, there's a dredging plan, so Hudson's going to catch up. But it's a good time to look in Hudson, by the way. Get some real value in Hudson before they start dredging. But once you get up into Hernando County and further north, what happens is the Gulf is so shallow, close to land. It's so shallow. They're almost like grass islands, right? I mean, just marshy, grassy. So you really have to go a long ways to get on the Gulf. But right here in our part of the world, you have direct Gulf access. You're just out there in minutes. And I've done a lot of travel around the state and around the country, and this is a rare waterfront, and we're still way undervalued for what these kinds of properties cost other places. And so buyers come in though, and they hear that, they know that, and so they really have high expectations on what they're going to be able to buy. And so it is an educational process. It takes some time for that buyer to get educated, especially if they're not familiar with the waterways and what things cost and all the particulars on it.
Well, and then the other thing is they also need to know how long it takes to get out to the Gulf, because some properties are tucked way back in a neighborhood, and by the time you get out through the channel, it could take you 30 minutes or 45 minutes, right? Or even longer.
I mean, for the most
Especially at
part,
idling
you
speed.
do with pricing, you're gonna pay a lot, you're gonna pay less for the homes on the narrow canals that are deeper into the neighborhood than you are for those on the wider canals that are closer to the Gulf, and you're literally out there in 5 minutes.
So talk to us about seawalls and insurance, because there's a lot there too, right? I mean, we could talk for hours on type of water, type of boat, because it's a kind of a different needs analysis. It's a lifestyle needs analysis, and everyone starts with what their boat is or which boat they want to buy, right? Because that kind of eliminates most of the properties. But next to that, then it's
Well,
seawall.
what I've learned is that not all buyers agents, realtors educate their buyers on, first of all, insurance. And it used to be that I would have deals falling apart because we get it under contract, and then the buyer would start researching insurance and get these god awful quotes and cancel the contract. So one of the things that I do is on any new waterfront listing, I get an insurance quote and I put it right in the listing. So definitely know the insurance costs before you even start trying to sell a house, because it's significant, or it can be significant. And then the second part of that is I have learned that not all insurance brokers understand flood insurance. And there is a tremendous amount of misinformation about that. I have one go-to person that I always use, because I've been working with Jeff Starkey literally since I started in real estate. So 20 years. And he knows this area better than anyone. And he'll give you the accurate information. And he even knows how to get around things. Like, are you familiar with firm or pre-firm? Does everyone know what a pre-firm house is?
Not everyone here does. So let's talk about that.
All right. So what firm is flood rate insurance map. Flood rate insurance map. And in our area, the flood rate insurance map became into effect in about 1982, 83, 84, around that time. And in Pasco County, it's 83. So that's why you see all these one-story homes, because most of them were built prior to the implementation of the flood insurance rate maps. So they're called pre-firm, and they do enjoy and participate in grandfathered in rates. So a lot of people ask me, well, I need an elevation certificate to get a flood quote on this 1973 house. Oh no, that's not going to help you. Trust me. If you go by the flood elevation, you're going to get a $10,000 quote for flood insurance. No, you want the grandfathered in pre-firm rates. And that's something you want to make sure. I mean, I don't know of any insurance agent, and no offense to them, but they'll say, oh yes, I can give you a flood quote. And I am telling you, I have learned it's just not true. There's so much information, misinformation.
It's almost like you want an insurance agent that rocks it out in Waterfront, that you just go to anytime you're on any part of the deal when it has water included, right?
Yeah, and they're so ahead of the curve. There's a couple of guys. I have my favorite, which I told you. There's a couple I know of here in this area. Who
is your favorite, Judy?
Pardon me?
Who is your favorite insurance guy to go to?
It's Jeff Starkey with Great Florida Insurance. Actually, anybody in his office, but Jeff Starkey's office, Great Florida Insurance. And I always put a flood quote in my listing, like I said, because I want to plan problems out of the system if I can. And that helps. Hey, they just redid the flood insurance rate maps too. So there are a lot of homes all over our area that have moved from, believe it or not, it got better, not worse. They have moved from V zone, which is double to triple the amount of flood insurance if you're in a V zone, to an A zone. And all of a sudden, those properties become a lot more marketable, because literally their flood insurance rate did drop from 6,800, 10,000 a year down to 2,000 or 2,500 a year, much more affordable. And so that's a good thing to know as well.
That is such good information right there. And there's so much misunderstanding, and I don't know how many times I've heard people, especially in our neighborhood, because there's an area that used to be a golf course. They have to go under a bridge to get to the golf that people have bought that have sailboats or T-top, that there's no way they're ever going to get through. So
You
Yeah,
really,
but how do we determine this criteria per neighborhood? Like, is there a site that we go to? Is there?
the criteria. What kind
Yeah,
of
like
criteria?
she just said, the bridge to be able to get their boat out when the water goes up.
as
can't
a,
get out,
as
or
a,
down,
as
or
a,
can get out. How do we determine
yeah,
that?
as a listing agent, it's your job to be able to get all that information and provide it to the buyer. So you need to know that. You need to
So
ask
where do
those
I get
questions.
where do I get the information if, let's just say, my seller doesn't have a boat?
It's local knowledge. It's local knowledge. I mean, we have such good GPS and everything too. You can look at the GPS and, but if your seller really doesn't have any, doesn't have the information. I mean, what I do often is I get on a boat and go check it out. And then literally it's called, they used to call me a 7-day vacationist. I mean, I don't call me that anymore, but my friends up north call me a 7-day vacationist because I'd be out on a boat and telling them I'm working. I am working. I'm working. I'm doing research, but literally.
And there's another one thing I'll add to that though, is getting your buyer to download their own tide chart, because you don't want to be telling them anything. You want them to see it for themselves, what the tides are. That helps as well. There's apps for that, for tide charts, but that's important to know.
So other things that are important to know when you're looking at waterfront, I mean, definitely Gulf, if it's Gulf access, and that's really what we're talking about today, is Gulf access and boating water. But you definitely want to know what size boat can I moor here? How wide is the seawall? If a house has 40 feet of water, it's going to be worth a lot less than. My phone's blowing up this morning. It usually doesn't blow up this early. Of course, it's doing it now because I'm not. But anyway, it is. I mean, a 40 feet of water is going to be worth. It's going to be significantly different than 300 feet. For example,
Of frontage, you're talking frontage.
Yes, I'm talking frontage. And the seawall is extremely important. And I would not rely on a home inspector to give you a seawall evaluation. And it's very tricky because the seawall contractors are so busy. It's hard to get them out there to give them a proper, evaluation. But it is something you don't want to ignore if you're the buyer's agent or you're the selling agent, because it's a significant cost and they do have a lifespan. And in Gulf Harbors, most of these seawalls are 50, 60 years old. And so if they have not had if they have not been reinforced and had some maintenance over the years, they could very well be close to their end of their lifespan. And I have a $2.2 million listing right now. The most fabulous house in Gulf Harbors, in my opinion. I love that.
Yeah,
house.
I love that house.
It's like Jessica's will be one day. It's a similar type of lot with 300 feet of seawall. But they just rebuilt that seawall and elevated, raised it by 2 feet. And I really don't know exactly how much they spent, but I'm going to tell you it was 6 figures and more to redo that seawall. But now guess what? Whoever buys that house, they're good for 50 years. It's gonna, once you have it done, it's really it's a significant investment that'll last a long time.
But worth mentioning, Jude, there's so many people that buy these cute little bungalows in like Hudson. We'll pick on Hudson, and it's on water. Little do they know that it's a crumbling seawall. They may have thought they got a deal because they went up to Hudson or whatever, and they've got a seawall that's going to cost them $50,000 to $75,000, or $50,000 or whatever. And all of a sudden that deal was not so good, and they could have bought so much better even south. And so that the seawall is not something to have a inspector do. It's a specific inspection.
Yeah.
Is a seawall something you get a long-term loan for, like 7 to 10 years, or is that something you have to pay off in a year or two?
I don't know anybody that loans money on a seawall.
No.
Yeah,
No.
And that's not something you can put into the mortgage, right?
I don't know any seawall or marine contractors that do loans. I mean, you don't buy the seawall separately. Yeah, I don't know if you could get a 50, what's that FHA loan, which is a rehab loan? I don't know if you could get one.
Yeah, I don't think so. Yeah, it's really part of the deal. So it can really haunt someone if they buy a property and it's not been inspected. And we hear that a lot. You know, you may go out and view the property and it might be high tide, and then at low tide, all the sins are showing.
Yeah.
Right? That kills a lot of deals.
The other things that are really important, like, you know, there's a difference between a davit. A davit is a lift that everybody had up until, say, 20, 25 years ago. Everybody had a davit. That's how you lifted your boat out of the water, but it's like a dinosaur now. But they do work, and people still use the davits. They definitely look like dinosaurs to me.
They like hold kayaks now. Boats are much bigger than they used to be, I think.
And then a lift, you know, so that's not the same thing. A seawall does not impact appraisal, no. Appraisers wouldn't have a clue about a seawall. Although if you just put $200,000 into a seawall, like my client just did, and I was meeting an appraiser, I would certainly bring him that information and, you know, show, like, look, you know, but I don't think it's definitely a standard on an appraisal checklist.
It's just like a really expensive roof. It's either got lifespan or it doesn't. And that's really the truth of it.
And then another really significant thing that is so important is called riparian rights. And a riparian rights, when we live in this community, we don't own that waterfront. You know, my property line ends at the seawall. So what gives me the right to put my boat there, you know, right on the water there, right in front of my seawall? It's called a riparian right. And it's very, especially if you're dealing with a corner lot, or I mean, corner lots end, you know, one at the end of the canal. This is where you really need to be educated on what your riparian rights are for that property, because I've definitely seen conflicts, you know, neighbors becoming enemies, things like that. Where can you put a dock? You do have to get a permit to put a dock, and your marine contractor will know the riparian rights. But this is something that you as an agent, if you're selling homes, will really want to be familiarized in, so that you can don't try to be the expert. It's like you're not a roofer, you know, you're not you're not going to give them advice on this. That you're going to let the home inspector tell them what's going on with the home, right? Well, you're going to let the marine contractor, you know, or you can get a marine survey that discusses the riparian rights. But you can also point them to the information that's available online about what the legalities are regarding riparian rights.
Yeah, it's because it's sticky. Because I know Mark and I have a good friend that bought a property, and they're right. They don't have a lot of frontage because they're right in the corner, but they're barely ever here. It was a great investment property. But now the neighbor next to them just bought a 56-foot boat. They can't even see the water because it takes over their whole view. And so that's going to be a riparian right argument, but they just don't want to deal with it right now. And yet that stuff happens. So people want to know what the rights are. Giving them the information or the resources to go know what that is, or know what their truth is important. Because you wouldn't get involved in that as a realtor. That's a neighbor to neighbor issue.
Well, yeah, and there are clear clear as mud, but clear guidelines on who gets what. And so it's important to know what that is when you're going into it, so you can help your buyer make wise decisions. But really, it's all about the lifestyle. That's in conclusion. It's all about the lifestyle. And really, the water is more important than the house. Even though the house is important, but to many buyers, I mean, they'll put up with a lot on the house. And that's where the compromises are usually made. You know, I've seen many more buyers, and they come in with this idea of what they can get, you know, and they learn they have to compromise. And if they're really serious about living the lifestyle and having a boat in their backyard, that's going to be way more important to them than the house itself. So they end up getting that little, you know, bungalow fixer-upper That's okay, because I got, you know, my chunk of seawall here on the North Channel, and I'm on the Gulf in 5 minutes. And that's with plenty of water for my 56-foot boat, whatever it is.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So who has
Yeah.
questions for Judy? I mean, Judy, first of all, you're such a value of resources. Jim, you have a question?
Yeah, you talked about a bridge and talked about the clearance for a bridge for somebody that has a boat with a tower on it or something. Do you actually go out at low tide and check it out, and go out at high tide
Well, let
to
me
let
tell
the
you what,
person
I
know?
have a hurricane. It's like a hurricane boat with a bimini top.
Mhm.
And yes, one night Kurt and I were doing a canal cruise underneath the bridge and under the bridge water. And when we came back, the tides had come and it ripped the top of my bimini. So I definitely did a personal.
You
Okay.
personally inspected.
So
But
you know it's
yeah. But that's why a tide chart helps, because a lot of people don't understand tide. And you know, if you're working with a very experienced boater, they're going to know all this. So if you don't know this, you're not going to look like you really got your act together. If they're new, they're relying on you. And so you don't want to take the liability of them saying, hey, Jim, you said my boat would, you know,
Fit.
but you want to be telling them, you know, and if you look at the bridge, it does have a sign on it. You can't dictate if, you know, the tide's higher than usual. You don't want to take down that responsibility. So having them download an app and really evaluate is something for them to consider. But I wouldn't want to take that responsibility on.
Here's the thing. I mean, a certain type of boats don't even go there. I mean, just, it's not a good, but you know what? You can get a good deal on the under the bridge water, because you still have fabulous water. You have a beautiful, you know, home in a great neighborhood, and you pay less because of that, because you don't, it's obstructed versus unobstructed Gulf access.
right. The one I just sold has one bridge to go under, and the buyers looked at the boats to either side of their dock. It came with a lift, 12,000-pound lift. So it had a 30-foot boat Sea Ray on it before they went up for sale. But they looked at the boats on either side, and they talked with the neighbors on either side. And they found out the clearance that the bridge would allow at high tide and at low tide, the basic clearance, because things change. And they bought it, loved it. They're there now. But I didn't have a boat, couldn't go look at the side of the bridge and see what the different clearances are.
Yeah.
So I had them talk to the neighbors.
Looking around.
Real quick.
What kind of boats are back there is a great way to judge it. And
Right.
it is, I mean, like, look at these boats. But, you know, a lot of the boats, you know, they may only be able to get in and out during low tide. And it's just something that you may decide you can live with. But it's good to know that at least you have presented that as a, you know, something
they need to evaluate and decide on. You know, you're not giving them the answer, because you know, you don't want to have that liability if they buy a different boat
Right.
after the fact, say, well, Jim told me, you know.
Right. Thank you.
Yeah. It's
Most-
like, no, I didn't. Yep.
You can and this is for free at NOAA. You can just get a free local marine map. And if you know where that person lives, you can follow the waterway, and each map will have vertical and horizontal clearance of all bridges. But they still need to check, as a captain, it's your responsibility once you're on a boat to make sure that your journey, that you're going to have safe passage through all bridges and stuff.
Right. And I think from a liability standpoint, just to put the liability cap on this, you can direct them there, but don't lead them there. Let them make these decisions for themselves, because if you get too involved and if things go sideways, they're going to blame you on it. And the maps aren't that accurate. Especially right now, like there's certain areas that say they have this or that. After Michael came through, there's like sandbars in places they didn't have, you know, things move. And so you just don't want to take on liability with that. So just tell them, maybe have a list of resources, and even have them acknowledge that they need to do their own homework to make sure that the lifestyle is going to match the boat and everything that they want. And I would just make sure that's very clear, even in an email, reminding them that you did that. But for people like Judy that are on the water, you know, she feels more comfortable talking about it because she's been selling that lifestyle for so many years now. And yet at the same time, if I'm an avid boater and you don't know these things and you're my agent, that's just not going to look good for you. truth be told, right?
Right.
Buying the
And then
lifestyle.
for that bridge, the other question was at low tide, when I have a lot of clearance, what's the draft look like? What's the water depth look like there? So that was something else that I had to kind of push them off and have them talk to neighbors about how they handle their coming and going. And they did, and they're satisfied. But that's something else that would be nice to know, or nice to be able to tell them where to go to get the information when you're selling something that has a bridge to go under. I've got another one at on Island Estates that, of course, it has no bridge. It's going right out to Sand Key Bridge. So that one is pretty simple, and they are putting in their own lift. It doesn't have a lift; they have a dock but no lift. So they're excited too. So that was easier for me.
Well, and you just got to be careful because like by Bailey's Bluff, it's very skinny water and there's no channel, but you can't get out. So it's like, so just know that those are things that, certain neighborhoods when we were shopping were completely eliminated because of the boat we were going to get. And we wanted to be closer to Palm Harbor. And Nikki basically told us, go to Gulf Harbors. That's basically, she's like, go to Gulf Harbors, talk to Judi. I'm like, okay. Because she knew that when we relocated from Wisconsin, that water was really important to us and lifestyle was really important for us. And yet we could not have our boat really in the Palm Harbor area. We couldn't, not our big boat. So just know that that stuff is important too. And, you've got resources. So Judi, you're our waterfront expert in our office 10 times over. Thank you for sharing, because these are really important things. You don't want to get yourself in hot water when you're doing a deal, when you're selling the water. So just make sure you're reaching out for help when you need it, and don't overhelp, and make sure you're sharing good resources, but never assume anything when you're selling water, right, Jude?
That's for sure. Absolutely. And if you can get a boat and get out there, if you can honestly say that you're working and you're enjoying, life, and we'll be happy to help you with that sometime if you let us know. But I also have something I want to say. We have a birthday girl on the call.
Ooh, who do we got?
Happy birthday, Esther.
Esther, let's end with happy birthday. Here we go. Everyone, happy birthday to you. Okay, that's it. Esther, you don't want any more. We love you. We love you too much to ruin your day with our horrible singing. We love you, Esther. Happy birthday.
Thank you so much.
Everybody.
Hope it's better than our singing. Okay, love you guys. Have a great day. Bye-bye. Thanks, Jude.